not one single student. No one is proficient in math in 23 schools. This has to be statistically impossible. All right, hi everyone, I'm Dr. Brittany Glenn White, and thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be like a casual type of video that I responded to. And if I can get like little tech savvy, I'll show the clip somewhere of what sparked this conversation. So if you see me looking down on my phone a lot, because I have a lot of articles, well, three that I want to like insert into the story. So I was minding my own business and on YouTube, and I saw someone reacting to this outrage on Twitter after Baltimore reveals zero students proficient in math across 23 schools. Failure. So, not being proficient in math. Now, to be fair, they use a standardized test to determine that. So, I'm not going to sit here and say, students can't add, subtract, multiply, and divide. So to be fair, that is what it means to be proficient. They use that, I think it's the MCAP. So Maryland Comprehensive, I don't know, it's a standardized test. Every state has it. So that is what they use. So for them to say students weren't proficient means that nobody, not one child, passed the exam out of 23 schools. So the clip I said earlier about this has to be statistically impossible. One of my friends, we message each other on Instagram a lot, and she has her doctorate degree in technology education, distance education, something like that. But her background is like English and things like that, and she's a really good teacher, well, professor as well. And she was the one said that this has to be statistically impossible, and I was like, yes, I am going to use that phrase. So then I made the post and I checked my messages, which I normally don't check my DMs from people I don't know. But this name came across and they had been watching like my YouTube channel, especially my lives, and they've been commenting. I was like, I know this name. So I was like, well, let me open it. And it was from a 6th grade student that I had way back in the day. Like, I know I look like super young, but I got some decades on me. And to see that message from this young man who was my 6th grade student, and now he has a family of his own, he's a full grown man. And I remember how he was in the 6th grade. He wasn't a problem child, but he was very active. And the message he sent me after I made the post, like, how in the world is this possible? He was like, exactly. You tell them because you were the best math teacher I ever had. Now, mind you, I had him in 6th grade. He had other years to get other math teachers after me and before me, but he said I was the best teacher that he had, math teacher that he had. And I almost started crying. I was like, oh my gosh, because if you know my story, especially teaching in higher ed, it was not the case. So I was like, well, why would he say that about me? Now, this is when I'm in my early 20s because I was fresh out. I think he was in my first class, first or second cohort of students. And he had to be in my first or second. So I was like fresh out. So I was like, well, what would make him say that? And I am in my 20s without all of this experience, that I have now. And all of this depth of knowledge that I have now, what made me stand out to him? And I will say this, and then we're going to get into why no child is proficient in these 23 Baltimore schools. If I didn't know anything else, I knew my content. I knew mathematics forwards, backwards, inwards, outwards. I knew how to teach mathematics. I knew how to get you to like it, even if you didn't love it, and I got you to do it and understand it, even if you hated it. And I was like friendly with the students, but I was also stern. I used to get in, I don't want to say trouble, but I got low marks in building connections with students because I always believed like, I'm not here to be your friend. And back then I looked even younger than this, and I was the same height as 6th graders, back then. And So I still had to come in, and I interned in a high school. So I was already like, I just had to create some distance, right? So I was already that kind of person. I wasn't really relational with the students, but what they were going to get from me was to know this math. And so for that student, well, a former student, when he messaged me, I remember that he would always get in trouble by other teachers, but not in my class, because I recognized, well, he's only acting out because this little work that we're doing right here is not advanced enough for him. And we were in, it was sixth grade math, but they were in a special cohort. They were the IB students, International Baccalaureate students. And even the work I was giving them was not enough. So was like, all right, we're going to start pulling out this pre-algebra work, for these sixth graders. And that led to me teaching, pre-algebra in sixth grade the following year, because I was like, whoa, some of these kids are coming in higher than we expected them to come. So I would say, for me, knowing how the trajectory of mathematics works, I could see that beyond the problem child. And like I said, he wasn't a problem for me even before I started challenging him. It was just certain things I didn't accept in my classroom, even at that young age, like, whoa, slow your roll. But I was like, my goal is to get you to learn this math, right? So I would challenge him a lot. And I think he would still come to my class, seventh and eighth grade. And I would make sure I talked to his teachers, like, you got to challenge him. You have to give him some stuff, or it's not going to go well for you. So I wanted to say that, and I'm leading with that, is I knew my content. So a lot of times people are saying, like, it's the teacher's fault, or the teachers are under so much pressure, and this, that, and the other. And normally I am on the side of the teacher when this happens, because I know what it's like. I spent a couple years teaching K-12, sixth grade. I went to high schools, and I got all the levels. So I understand both sides. But in this case, I'm going to weigh heavy on the teacher. I don't want to say blame, but I'm going to weigh heavy on the responsibility of the teachers. And then I'll get to the administration. I'm not going to say what I think the whole problem is, because let me put this out here. I am going to say there's sickness and there's money in the sickness. So if you can keep saying that there's a problem with the schools, then you can throw money at certain ways. So consultants, textbook companies, testing companies, all of that. All I'm going to say is there's money in the sickness. And if you don't want to treat I'll leave it at that. So I'm just going to give you some practical things, because this is bigger than, zero proficiency in mathematics. And forgive me if I'm rambling. Stay with me. So my teachers, I love y'all. I really do. I have a soft spot for teachers, especially mathematics teachers. And this is not for the people. And it's unfortunate, because there are some amazing teachers out there at every grade level, but don't nobody want to highlight them. There are some people who are like truly gifted. But I am going to say that the gifted teachers are not they're not out here like they used to be. They're just not. Or they may have been, but the way the system has been set up, they just been crushed, and it's just like, forget it. So I'm not talking to y'all. So those of you who are doing what I am about to say, and you've been doing your thing, don't comment. I'm not talking about you. I know you're out there, but y'all know who I'm talking about. So if you can't say it, I'll say it, because I'm not in the classroom. And I'm not in any unions. I'm not affiliated. So I get to say what I want to say. Although I said what I want to say when I was teaching. But anyway, when I first started school, and this probably happened with that second cohort, I had such an amazing first year of students. I only had 88 students from sixth grade. So all 5 of my classes combined were 88 students, which are a dream. The following year, I had 125 of them. No, 125, 30, 130. I don't know. It was a lot. And I was not getting the same results. Like, I don't know what the issue was. And my test results came back, and they were like low, like 60% of students being proficient on our benchmarks. Because not only was and here's the thing, I wasn't only assessing people or knowing that the students understood the work based on my assessments. there are some teachers who are like, they create their own assessments. I would use the assessments from the textbook, and then I would tweak it if need be, for other things. If you're an education major, or you understand how that works, there are some things you need to tweak. But as far as the content, that stayed solid. So I would use the textbook things to assess them on, and I could tell if they were getting it or not. But then we would do these benchmarks that came from the district and the state, and that we didn't create. So these questions the students had to answer. It's like, well, let's see if it matches up. And I was still scoring like 60, 70%. My students were, being on grade levels, 60, 70% of them, which honestly is higher than, it was higher than the district average, but it was still like, 67% is not that great, right? It's still a C and D if you look at it for grades, right? And I remember going to my principal at the time saying that, oh my gosh, these students that you gave me, they're not the smart kids that I had before. And what's wrong with them? It's like, I'm doing everything I can, which looking back, no, I wasn't. I was complaining more, about the kids. I was comparing them a lot. And I remember he closed that door and he said, let me tell you something. First of all, don't ever come into my office again saying these kids or those kids. They're your kids. And you have them from August to May, because back then we were getting out of school in May. You have them from August to May, all of these hours of the week. It is your responsibility to move them. I don't care what's happening on the outside, but what I'm focusing on and what you need to focus on is what you're doing in this classroom by the time you have them. And if you're doing what you're supposed to do, there is no way that every child will not move. Now, of course, he meant like the kids who are actually coming. So we're not talking about the ones who don't show up. We're not talking about them. He was like, the ones who you get to talk to and teach every single day, or when they do come, there's no way that you can have any impact. I ain't crying in the office, but I cried in the car. And I kid you not, from my second year, from that point on, every single standardized test, whether it was from the district or the state, we were in the high 90 percentile. I never got 100%, but we were like 92, 94, 96, 97 by the time I left out, because he was right. It was like, don't tell me about all of these external factors. You got one job, and your job is to move these students and make sure they understand this material. Because remember, you're the one that says you have the expertise in this area. I'm like, oh crap. So I took that same thought when I became an academic coach, and I was teaching, working in high school. I was teaching, but then I was like, they needed me full time to serve 17 math teachers from intensive mathematics all the way up to pre-calculus. And I remember giving that same speech to my teachers, like, hey, I know, and let me say this. I didn't teach in a fluent school. I was teaching at schools that were labeled as Title I. I don't know the new label now if they have one, but these were the schools that, based on the demographics, they shouldn't be excelling. So I wasn't in one of those schools where, now some of the kids were, they came ready, they had parental involvement, community involvement, they came ready, but a lot of them didn't. So I just want to say that, so before anybody says, oh, you must have been in this type of school. No, I wasn't. So when I got to the high school, which was in a different situation than the middle school, I gave that same speech to the teachers. And I remember there was one teacher who had a student, and okay, let me back up. When I was teaching in the 6th grade, there were students who were like fresh to the country. Like they came a couple of months into the semester, like coming from Haiti, because we had a lot of Haitian students not knowing English. And it was still my job to get them to move. And I will say this, the easy part is, at least the numbers, you can follow some numbers. If you can't understand the words I'm saying, you can follow some numbers. And I used that experience when I went to the high school, because there was one of my teachers, bomb teacher, and she had a student who just came from China, like in the middle of the year, and they are still required. He's going to count on her assessment, right? And she was like, she put him, and I told her the story about my Haitian student. And so with this student, she put him front row, and she said, whatever I do, you do on the board. And although he made like a C in her class, because of some other stuff, when it was time for him to take that assessment, though, her scores never dropped below 95%. And he was in the mix. So you're probably asking, what does any of this have to do with none of the students being proficient in Maryland, and why I brought this up about the teachers? You cannot tell me that you've been teaching your content every single day for at least 45 minutes. So we're not even going to say the whole hour, because there's some things. For at least 45 minutes every day to these students, and nothing sunk in. Impossible. There is no way. There is no way. And just like the principal told me all those years ago, I still hold true to that. And when I would teach my college level students who were going to teach mathematics, I told them, even in internship, even when if you're not the teacher on record, if you're going to be in front of those students, you have to leave them with something. There is no way they can't learn something at the end of the day. There is no way. So here's what I'm thinking, and then I'll get to the leadership part. So they were naming all of these schools, and then they said Baltimore Public School boasted a $1.6 million budget in 2022, and the average cost per student came out to be $21,606. 1.6 billion. Okay. I had to recall that 1.6 million is not a lot of money. 1.6 billion, excuse me. So $20-some thousand per student, if you do it right, that should be enough to get them at least the basics of school. So we're not talking about after school. The basics of what these students and teachers need. Okay. So if y'all say y'all had that money, then what happened? Because in Florida, our average, some of these schools, $9,000 per student. So yeah, I won't get too much into that. So they're basing this off the assessment. And I know a lot of people say, well, don't teach to the test. And I'm going to say right here, that's BS. That is BS when you say don't teach to the test. There's a reason. I probably did a video about this somewhere on the channel. There's a reason why there are standards in the curriculum. There are documents in the curriculum. They tell you what's about to be on the exam. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I went to Maryland, their Department of Education. It says, the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program for Mathematics. They tell you what is going to be on the exam. Every single state has this. I think I was a little biased because I learned about curriculum when I was in undergrad. Not only because I have 2 degrees from undergrad, mathematics, where I knew all the stuff, and then secondary education, where I learned all of the education stuff. And so I have both of those backgrounds. And then when I started working as a teacher, I really got into understanding how textbooks are laid out, how curriculum is laid out, how the standards are laid out for every subject, but particularly mathematics. And then my master's degree is all that. Then I have a specialist degree in technology management administration to actually look at all of this stuff, this curriculum design and instruction. So, and then when I was a district level coach or specialist, whatever the term they want to use, had to go in and look at all of this stuff. So I'm not just talking. The people tell you what they're going to test. And whatever your thoughts are about the test, I'll say this. I don't believe assessments should be used in the way that they're used, like holding students back or being tied to teacher salary. That's ridiculous. But they are important because we need to know where you are. You get assessed in everything else. Driver's test, health test, medical, college, you get assessments everywhere, right? Personality tests. So you need to have a benchmark of where you are and to see where you want to go. So they tell you they have content standards for Maryland college and career readiness. Now there was a whole thing about Common Core and people had their feelings about that. All I'm saying is they tell you what's on the test. They give you the roadmap. Whatever your feelings are about that, the people tell you what they want. So I clicked on blueprints for grade 8. And then it tells you, it gives you a domain, it gives you a cluster, and it gives you the number of items. So for the number system, know that there are numbers that are not rational and approximate them by rational numbers. It's going to be 2 items on the test for that. I'm not going to go through all of them. And this is 8th grade. And it says expressions and equations. Work with radicals and integer exponents. Understand the connection between proportional relationships, lines, and linear equations. It's going to be 10 items on those. And it had like 2 other things underneath there. Then it tells you about reasoning subdomain. It tells you about the evidence statements. It tells you how it's going to be scored. It tells you the point value. I'm not making this stuff up. So, and every state has this. So when they give you the blueprint and you're like, I don't know what to teach, or I don't want to teach to the test, let me tell you something. If you're teaching, here's the example that came to me yesterday as I was thinking of how I wanted to write this up. And I was like, I'm just going to talk. Think about this. If you're in a class and your job is to teach students how to make macaroni and cheese. Okay? They tell you, we're going to assess you on how to make macaroni and cheese. They tell you what the macaroni and cheese is supposed to look like. They give you all the ingredients of what they're looking for. Now, you can tweak the ingredients, and you know how we put a little spin on our recipes and things like that. But here's the baseline of what we're looking for. You go into the classroom, and then you're like, okay, they want y'all to do macaroni and cheese. I don't like all that other stuff. I just like the noodles. So we're going to make macaroni maps. We're going to take these little noodles, and then we're going to make little shapes. And then we're going to make like macaroni pictures or figurines and things like that. And you're doing that every day, doing a little gluing, like you're working hard. You're gluing, you're getting different type of noodles. You're talking about the noodles. You're talking about the different type of glue. You're looking at the artwork and say, use your imagination. You're doing all of this. And you're like, because I'm focused on the noodles. I don't want to teach to the recipe. I'm teaching what I think is valuable, these noodles. And then when assessment time comes, and then the students are presented with all the ingredients, then they just start playing with the noodles and ignoring the stuff over here, and time's up. And then they were like, well, you failed. And you're like, well, how? We spent so much time on these noodles. But you ignored all the other ingredients in the actual process of making the macaroni and cheese. How are you surprised? Same thing that happens in a lot of these classrooms. And I'm saying as an observer, I didn't just teach. I've observed the whole research I watched countless of thousands of hours of classroom instruction. So if anybody want to come for me, that's one area you cannot. When teachers are saying, I know that they're telling you all to add 3-digit numbers, but I think that is just too complicated for you all. We're just going to focus on adding these 1 and 2-digit numbers. And then when the assessment, because I don't want to teach to the test, I don't want to put that much pressure on you. And then the student comes, well, you think the skills should be transferable, but it's not. If they've never seen it before, how do you expect for them to pass? So I used to call BS when people say, I don't want to teach to the test. You're not teaching to the test, because if you're teaching at the level of rigor that's on these exams, everything else follows. But are you, educator, comfortable with the material? Are you doing the work yourself? Are you limiting the students because you're limited in your content? And there's been research since the 80s, probably 70s, because I'm thinking, and before that, but my research when I started learning was in the 70s, but it was prior to that, about teacher content knowledge. It's a whole thing. It's a billion-dollar industry talking about training and development, especially teacher content knowledge. And I remember me and my ABF back in the day, we used to be like academic best friends. We used to be like, all this talk about teacher content knowledge and the teacher still don't know content. Like, what else is, it's not about professional development. It's not about, it's me, especially when I was a consultant, I would love for you to give me a big contract and I come in and help your teachers learn what they need to learn. But They need, if you're going, whatever subject area, you need to know that subject backwards and forwards, not just from your limited experience as a student. You need to, if it's mathematics, you content expert need to know the mathematics with all the different, all this stuff I just told you. You need to know that, because how are you going to expect a child to know something that you won't even touch? This goes for science, history, English language arts, whatever the subject is. You are the content expert. Now, for my elementary people, y'all got a lot going on. You signed up for that. So you need to be a content expert in all of them, because that's what you signed up for. I'm just saying. I think it needs to be a different way. That's a lot on y'all, but that's what you signed up for. But for especially for my middle and high school people, you got one job. Now, you might have different preps. You know, some teachers may have algebra, they're teaching geometry, and they may have an intensive class. Well, then that's all part of it. Content expert. So I don't want that. So that's what I'm saying. That it's like my friend said, it is statistically impossible for not one child to be proficient. When they give you the roadmap, and whatever your thoughts are about that, hold on. All right, I have to take a call. So I was saying there is no way that the students, there's no way, because they tell you what they want you to learn. Be a content expert, learn the standards, and regardless of what your feelings are about the bigger higher ups, I'm gonna be honest, that's not your fight, that's not your battle. That's just how it's set up. Until you want to really change the structure of the education institution, then that's just what it is. So while you're in there, do that. All right, so I hope that makes sense. I had to take a phone call. Now I'm going to jump to the leader real quick. And there were people who were saying that the CEO of Baltimore Schools, one, they had a problem with her because her salary was like 300 something thousand, and then it jumped up to 400 something thousand, and this is still going on, and they're calling for her to resign. Now, I don't know the ins and outs. I didn't go too far into that, but I am going to say this. Having her resign is not going to fix the problem. And bringing up her salary is not going to fix the problem. And I know a lot of people talk about teacher salaries and this, that, and the other. I'm going to be honest, they're only paying teachers because of how they value the education system. And until that changes, and people can say whatever they want to say about this, but it's a lower vibration on the profession. And even though people have these high regards for teachers, the value isn't there. I hope you understand what I'm saying. It's like a lot of people approach education like, well, anybody can just be a teacher. And I'm not saying this to my people who are truly in the profession, but we got a lot of people coming in just because, it's something to do, or they need a change, or, well, I can do this, I guess, to have some time off. And they've brought down the caliber of teaching, the vibration of teaching. It is what it is. So don't even compare the pay of the teacher to the CEO of an organization. That's like, if you're thinking about the company, you're mad that, I just saw the article, the richest woman in the US, which is the Walton heir. You can't be mad that she's worth $56 billion when the employees at Walmart are getting, I don't even know, $10 an hour. They're probably getting more than that, but I'm just saying, hopefully. Okay, I'm back. So talking about the leader, I would say don't compare her salary. People were asking her to remove, like, you got to increase, but the schools are failing. In all fairness, her job is way more than just focusing on student progress on the exams. I know it sounds like, but that's her job. She's the CEO of a company. The CEO of Walmart or Target or any of these major companies, they're not looking at just the customer experience. If there's an issue, it's a chain of command. The sales associate, the manager of the store, the district person over that area, and then so forth and so on. So for her being the CEO or the superintendent, I don't know if they count them as the same person. Like I said, I didn't go too deep into that, but let's just say the CEO is the superintendent, because that's how it works in some other school districts. Then it's like, okay, you can let's say you do want to hold her accountable, but for her to be held accountable, it's like, is she talking to her downlines, for lack of a better word? Or is she talking to the area superintendents? Like, what are y'all doing? Are they talking to the district people or the principals of the schools? Like, I find it interesting that people are jumping from, well, the students aren't showing up. This type of student don't learn. Not true. Oh, well, we can talk about the teachers, and I already said that they have a big portion of that, but then we immediately jump to remove the superintendent or the CEO from the schools. It's a lot of people in between that have responsibility for that. So the principals, the assistant principals, if they have coaches in the classrooms, people are like, well, give them more professional development. What are y'all doing in the district level, or what are the leaders doing? In my opinion, I'm not, and my dissertation was on this. I'm not saying that every principal needs to know mathematics, but every principal or assistant principal that's over the instruction. So, like in my area, we used to have APIs, assistant principal of instruction, where your whole job is to look at curriculum and not because everyone should have. Well, everyone had different roles. You had an API, which was the most coveted spot, and then you had the other assistant principals who were over facilities or student behavior, things like that. But let's say the API. What are you saying to the API? That person needs to understand curriculum and have a broad view to be able to say enough to make the content expert, which is the teacher, make sure that they're doing their job. And then the principal, if they don't have an API, then it is the principal's responsibility to look at the level of what's going on in the classroom. I think that there's too many people not knowing enough about mathematics in this particular case, not knowing how to have the conversation and not being able to check someone if they're out of line. You're going into a classroom, and if all the students are sitting there quiet or they look like they're doing work, it's like, oh my gosh, you're a great teacher. But can you match the standard? Can you look at what I showed y'all? Can you look at that curriculum? Remember, I told you about the equations and expression. See what they're supposed to be doing. Look at that student paper. So if you're looking like, okay, I know y'all supposed to be learning about this macaroni and cheese recipe. Maybe today y'all will learn about the flour and the butter mix, making the roux, if that's what y'all do. Because we're not talking about Kraft mac and cheese, we're talking about homemade. So if you're making the roux, now when I walk into the classroom, I should be seeing students learning how to make a roux, getting something with the flour. I should be seeing that. It should match. When I hear the conversations, even if I've never made macaroni and cheese with the roux before, I should be able to look at that standard and know that these are the words that it takes to make that standard. I should be hearing that type of language in the classrooms. So people who are observing these classrooms, it's your fault too. So the teacher has the bulk of the blame, for lack of a better word, then the principals or who's ever observing the teachers, and then it goes up. So just making the jump from the students to the CEO or superintendent is not fair, and it's not good enough. Now, I'm not going to talk about the parents because that's a whole nother issue. Because yeah, we can say that, but I'm just saying from my experience of when I was that 20-something-year-old complaining about the students, this is your block of time, and you can't tell me that nothing came about you teaching them. If you said that you were doing what you're supposed to do, came from that time. Now, could it be classroom management issues? Probably. Work on that. Get it together. Different learning disabilities. I get all of that, but it's still no excuse. And I'm going to say this as a college professor, then you can bring in the universities and the teacher prep programs and the leadership prep programs. You can bring that into the mix about the failure. So that's all I'm going to say with that. I've been interrupted a few times. I got to hurry up and go because we are going to visit my mother's site, my mother and my grandfather's site. It is the 11th death anniversary of both of them. So I'm rushing. I had to take a few phone calls, but I want to get that out there. You'll probably see this video after that, but I'm recording it on this day. And I'm going to say shout out to my mom, who instilled in me the importance of not only just teaching, but practical applications to make people get what you are trying to say. And I do believe that's what made me a phenomenal mathematics teacher. I had to grow in some other areas, but that content knowledge was not going to be something that you challenged me with. And I took that all the way up to when I was teaching in higher education. All right. So that's all I have for you. Let me know your thoughts below. If you agree or disagree, I still want to know. Just be respectful in the comments, but we always have a great dialogue. And if there's something that I can discuss further, let me know. Again, let me know your thoughts, what school district you're from, what was your experience as a mathematics student, or if you're a teacher, tell me how you feel about what I said, and I can take it. And if you're an administrator, tell me how you feel about what I said, or if you're just someone who came across this video and you've had experience as a student in the education block as a student, let me know. All right, thank you all so much for listening and learning with me. And remember, the world needs you to be well, to be empowered, to be bold, and be brilliant. Until next time, bye.